Okay. Good morning, all. I'm sure you can hear me because I think they can hear us over the transporter bridge. It's, no, all good morning. Thanks for all attending. Before we start, I got a few. We are called broadcast. Just to make an announcement, today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by the way the council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcast arrangements prior to the meeting. Will members please use the microphone to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your camera when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch off when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are silent, as that happened, my phone rings. Right, okay, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Howells. Do we know of any others? No? Are there any members who have any declarations of interest?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the second application, application 22/1224, I follow protocols and I'll leave the chamber.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Okay, we go straight into item 1, which is from page 15 to 33, application 22/0576, site non-gold tops, and this will be presented by Gail Parkhouse.
Thank you, Chair. I'll share my screen. Okay, yeah, so this application is 22/0576 and it relates to 9 Gold Tops, which is a detached property. It's vacant and it's derelict following some fire damage between around about 2017-2018. It's located in the Alterine ward, and the application is to demolish the existing building and then construct a new building to provide 10 residential apartments and associated works. Just show you the aerial slide then to give you some context. So this is the building here. It was formerly used as offices. Like I said, it's been vacant even before the fire damage, so it's been vacant for around about 10 years. You can see the rear of the building here is very overgrown. And there are 2 protected trees within the site. So there's a protected tree roughly here, and then also one at the front of the site. To the west then is an office building here, and here's the Civic Centre. To the north, more offices, and these here are listed buildings. And then you've got some residential flats here to the north of the site. This is offices. The building next door has been converted into flats, so that's residential. And then to the south is a children's nursery and a clinic. So the area is primarily a mix of offices and residential. To show you the building itself then. So this road is Gold Tops. This is the building subject to the application. You can just about see some of the fire damage there and some of the vegetation. And then still on Gold Tops, looking back towards the Civic, you can see the building here in its fire damaged state. And then this is looking on Godfrey Road, looking towards the site. You can see the building in the background. Again, all of the vegetation. Just worth noting here, it's proposed to create a new access off Godfrey Road in this location here. And then this is a sort of a direct look at the site from Godfrey Road. Yeah, you can see how overgrown it is at the moment. And then I've just included this photograph. It's taken from 2012, but it just gives you an idea of how the site looks with a bit less vegetation. You can see the rear of the building before the fire damage, and it's thought that actually that was the principle of elevation, just because it's more prominent, so it's got quite a bit of detailing, or it had a bit of detailing in that elevation. Before I talk about the proposals itself, I just wanted to talk about the planning history, just because it's important and it's a material consideration really for the application. So in 2014, planning permission was granted for the conversion and extension of the then undamaged building to form 9 flats. And this is the layout of that permission. In 2021, that time frame to implement the permission was extended for another 5 years. So there's an extant or a live permission on the site for those 9 flats until October 2026. So this represents a fallback position for the site. And like I said, this slide shows the layout. Here's the building, parking area, and then the elevation. So that was the front elevation fronting onto Godfrey Road, onto Goldtops, and that was the rear elevation facing towards Godfrey Road. So this is the proposed layout, which we are considering today, and you'll notice the similarities between the current proposal and the extant consent. So a building in pretty much the same location as that extant consent, a parking layout which is very similar to that extant consent. It provides 11 parking spaces. Is some bin storage in this location here, and another 4 parking spaces at the front. And also this layout is showing the 2 protected trees. So 1 protected tree here and 1 protected tree here. Okay, this slide is showing the front elevation. Both images of the front elevation. This one's just zoomed in. The one at the top gives you some context with the neighbouring buildings. So you can see from the design, it has some set-down wings on either side. Its height and its massing are similar to the extant consent which I showed you. And also its height and its scale is similar to those neighbouring buildings either side. This is actually an amended design following concerns from the Conservation Officer regarding the impact on nearby listed buildings. The earlier scheme didn't include any set down of these side wings, and the fenestration was, or the windows and doors was entirely modern. So this design now has incorporated some set downs of those wings, some more additional detailing in the arch head of those windows, and then some banding through the elevational treatment. And those concerns and those sort of features addressing the concerns of the Conservation Officer. This then is the rear of the building. You'll note that it's 3.5 stories at the rear, which responds to the gradient of the site as it slopes down from Goldtops. So there'll be accommodation on, this is the ground floor, and then on the first floor and also in the roof space this lower ground level, or the basement level, would provide a plant, an area for bike storage, an area for cycle storage, and then this here below is a retaining wall, which actually is much reduced from the extant consent, and that just allows the levels at the rear of the site to be kept relatively as is. And you'll also notice that the flats at the back have access to some balconies. Okay, so this is a side elevation section of the building. You can see Gold Tops here, how the site drops down towards Godfrey Road. This straight line here shows where some of the land would be excavated to create that retaining wall. And then this red dotted line just marks the outline of the existing building before the fire damage. But you can see that the height of the proposed building is broadly similar to that of the existing building. And then just to give you some comparison of the two sites side by side. So this is the extant consent. This is the proposal we're looking at today. And you can see the similarities between the parking areas and the siting of the building. Just to run through the floor plans. So this is that lower ground floor or basement level. So there's some bin storage, cycle storage, accessible from outside of the building and within the building. So there would be 4 two-bed flats on the ground floor. The flats at the front would have access to a patio area. The flats at the back, access to a balcony area. This is the first floor, again, that's 4 two-bedroom flats. Those flats at the back would have access to some balconies. And then this is the roof space, and there would be 1 3-bedroom flat and 1 2-bedroom flat in the roof space, served by roof lights and some windows in the rear and front elevation. Okay then, so in terms of the assessment of the application, and in terms of publicity first, we consulted all properties within 50 metres of the application site, and this included 46 properties. Ward councillors were notified, a press notice and a site notice was put up. Other than an acknowledgement from Councillor Druitt, no other responses were received. So the main considerations have been the principle of development, that planning history and the extant consent, residential amenity, highways, trees, the design and heritage impacts, planning contributions. So I will run through all of these and then I'll summarise the recommendation and just run through the recommended conditions. Okay, so first, the principle of development then. The site's located within the settlement boundary, and the proposals would see the reuse of a previously developed land, which is in a sustainable location. Policy SB18 favours proposals which provide residential opportunities within the urban area and the reuse of derelict land. As I mentioned before, there's that extant consent for residential on the site. And so we consider the principle of development is in accordance with the broad brownfield strategy of the local development plan, and we're satisfied with the principle of development. Looking at the planning history then, as I mentioned, there's this extant consent for 9 1- and 2-bedroom flats with on-site parking. The previous scheme had permission to construct 2 two-storey side extensions, taking up the width of the plot. This proposal would see the demolition of the building due to that fire damage and the construction of an apartment block, increasing the number of flats by 1, so 10 in total. The location of the apartment block, the scale and its massing would be very similar to that under the extant consent. And in terms of the layout, the previous consent provided 11 parking spaces compared with 15 spaces currently proposed. And bin and cycle storage would be accommodated within the building rather than outside of the building as it was previously. Both schemes retain the trees subject of the tree preservation orders to the front and the rear of the site. So when comparing the two proposals, it's considered that the current scheme accommodates all of those previously acceptable considerations, along with some additional benefits in terms of an increase in parking and an improved design in terms of reducing that quite large retaining wall, which was part of the previous scheme. And that would kind of reduce that expanse of brickwork which would be visible from Godfrey Road. Looking then at residential amenity, the proposals have been assessed against the New Dwellings SPG, which sets out standards to ensure neighbouring residents and future occupiers have a good standard of living and are not adversely impacted by the proposed development. We're satisfied that the proposed development will provide a good standard of living to future occupiers with good natural light, access to balconies or communal amenity space. We've assessed the relationships with neighbouring occupiers, in particular that residential building to the east, which is number 8 Gold Tops, and we're satisfied that the proposal will protect existing and future amenity in terms of light, privacy and overbearing impacts, particularly when considering that extant planning permission. Looking then at highways and pedestrian safety, the proposed layout includes the provision of a new vehicle access onto Godfrey Road. Here, the highways officer had required adequate visibility space be provided. These have now been submitted and provided on a plan. They mirror those provided under the previous scheme, which provides a visibility display to the south of the site, so set back 2.4 metres and then running 43 metres along Godfrey Road. Visibility to the north isn't required because, as you know, Godfrey Road is a one-way street. Like I said, that's been provided on a plan, and we would secure that visibility display through a condition. And there's also, within that condition, a requirement to prevent any obstructions within that visibility display. In terms of parking, the proposal would provide 15 parking spaces and 20 secure cycle parking spaces within that basement. The site is located within parking zone 3, and in accordance with the parking standards SPG, 23 spaces would be required, including visitor parking spaces. So there is a deficit of 8 spaces. However, we recognise that the site is within a sustainable location. It's within walking distance to the town centre, and it's got within walking distance of public transport connections. So a reduced number of parking spaces can be justified in line with Planning Policy Wales and the drive to prevent an over-reliance on private motor vehicles. So when considering that, but also noting that every flat would have at least one parking space, we're satisfied that the parking provision is acceptable, and it actually provides a greater provision of parking than the previous consent. Looking now then at trees, so to the southeast corner there's a large tree here which is a horse chestnut tree. A tree survey was submitted with the application. It confirms that that tree is in a fair condition and it's got a lifespan of around about 20 or 40 years left. The tree officer has objected to the application with concerns about the proximity of the parking area to that tree. You've seen that that parking layout is the same pretty much as the extant consent. That extant consent also considered the impact on the tree. So as with the previous permission, we recommended with that consent that there would be a no-dig surface construction. So parking spaces closest to the tree would have a no-dig surface which would protect the tree roots. And we would, we're recommending that the same condition is imposed on this consent. We've also required some cross-sections through the site to allow us some assurance that any changes in ground levels wouldn't affect the tree. So this shows the layout plan. There's a blue line, I think whether you can see it, I'll just run my cursor along it. So the blue line runs along here. That blue line is then represented in this cross section here. So what it shows is that to create access onto Godfrey Road, there's a need to reduce levels in this part here, but then the rest of the site would retain its current levels. So that gives us an assurance then that tree roots would be protected and excavation isn't required. And yes, so to summarise, yeah, we're satisfied that that protected tree would continue to be protected. The protected tree at the front, that would be retained as is. Looking then at the design and heritage impacts, some detailed considerations being given to the design of the building and its impact on the surrounding street scene, with particular attention given to the impact on the neighbouring or the nearby listed buildings. As I mentioned earlier, this has resulted in an amended design, which the Conservation Officer now supports. So overall, we're satisfied that the proposal provides the right balance between a contemporary design and some traditional features. It's considered that the scale and massing of the building is appropriate in the street scene. It respects the scale and the massing of neighbouring buildings, and overall, officers are satisfied with its visual impact. Lastly, looking then at planning contributions. As with any proposal of this scale, contributions are sought towards affordable housing, education and leisure. These were put to the applicant, and then in return and in accordance with the Planning Obligations SPG, they have submitted an open book viability appraisal, and which is being reviewed. And based on the build costs and the market conditions, it's been agreed that the proposal would not be viable if contributions were provided. So it's considered in this case that the contributions are waived. So no contributions with this scheme. To just sum up then, some of the other considerations. So the impacts on drainage, on waste, ecology and climate change, we've looked at and were all considered acceptable, as set out in the report. So officers overall are satisfied with the proposed developments, and we are recommending that planning permission is granted subject to these conditions here, which I've summarised. So conditions to secure approved plans, ecological enhancement, boundary treatments, tree protection measures, the implementation of cycle and car parking, waste storage details, those visibility displays, a demolition and a construction management plan, details of foul drainage, and details of landscaping. And our recommendation is to grant subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kale. Now, we have no public speakers for this, so we're open now to the floor. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a few white points a second. I've got on I know it's been the building regulations. I know they're doing the conversion of the roof. Wouldn't that be something that the applicant should have actually put in for a fire escape, even though it's in the building regulations for that one? And is there any electric charging points for this development as well? Also, on 7.19 and 7.20, can you explain, they say it's 1 and 2 bedroom flats, but on those two items, the things there, you're saying flat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, got 2 beds, so flat 9 got 3, and flat 10 got 2. Where's the 1 bedroom flats? And also on flat 9 and 10, you said that the type of amenity space is not applicable and there's 0 space provided for the amenity space for them. Also, on 7.47, where the Section 106 money as well, is it now? It's going to be now the case now we're never into this climate now of affordability, everything else. There's no money around, so we're going to waive the 106 money.
Okay, girls, a bit there if you want to.
Okay, I think I've jotted everything down. So fire escape, you're right, it would be a matter to be dealt with by building regulations, so not a planning consideration. The electric charging, I think you've rightly picked that up, that it's not included with the plans, and we hadn't included that in a condition, but I think we should include that in a condition, so we would do that. In terms of the amenity space, yes, some of the flats wouldn't have access to a balcony, but there is space around the site for some communal amenity space. But it's also, it's close to the city centre, so future occupiers have that decision to make. It's that trade-off between being close to the city centre and maybe not having access to a garden, and that would be a decision for them, understanding the sustainable location. In terms of Section 106, it is a case-by-case basis. In this case, the figures don't stack up. It's a redevelopment of the site, so I guess the costs are higher. I don't know whether, Alan, you wanted to come in on that at all.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point. It is sort of, we deal with each site on its merits, so it is done on a case-by-case basis, as you say. I suppose the only thing to add is, on some of the smaller schemes, like this one, they don't tend to generate the economies of scale that the larger volume house builders do. So trying to generate some kind of viability in a scheme on the smaller ones tends to be quite difficult, and they tend to fall below the sort of 15 to 20% profit margin thresholds that we use as a sort of a standard. They're accepting a lot lower profit margins than your sort of, your Taylor Wimpey's or your Edrose. And there's a balancing act, I guess, between, seeing some of these sites. We want to see some of these sites to come forward, and we don't want to necessarily put a block on them because we're putting in 106 contributions that they can't afford, really.
Okay. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, so it was just on the roof space. You mean you've got a 3-bedroom space and a 2-bedroom. You could have a maximum there of 10 people in that attic. you know, and that's really, to me, that's a massive fire hazard as well for, you know, how people can get out. Would that, I know it's through building regs, but would they do that as part of the conditions, or something else they can do with that, or would that be done afterwards?
It's not something we could impose as a condition because it is dealt with by other legislation, and we've looked at the so when we look at the size standards of a flat, and it meets the size standard of a flat, a 3-bedroom flat and a 2-bedroom flat. So we can really only look at the amenity provided by that flat, and it meets those standards within the SPG.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was just saying that if they couldn't get building regulations approval for fire risk reasons, then they might need to amend the scheme, and then it would have to come back to us in any case.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Linden, did you raise your hand? No. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarification on the parking aspect. Obviously, there's 15 parking spaces. With the various sizes of these apartments, flats, are they going to be allocated one parking space per apartment flat, and then the other as visitors or first come, first served? Or is it the larger flats get allocated two? So how are they actually going to be allocated per flat?
I mean, that'll be very much up to the developer, how they allocate parking spaces. Yeah, it's not something that we control ourselves through planning.
Councillor Walkland.
Thank you, Chair. Number of questions. One is, what was the reason for extending the last planning application? And the other one, was there any 106 agreement made on that application? And if so, why is there none on this one? Even if it's just a smaller contribution than what we are requiring. In regard to the parking, visitors parking, are there any or none set aside? The other thing is, where you've got a no dig on parking issues, how close does the dig for the development come to that chestnut tree at the front? Or at the back end, I believe it is.
On the reason for extending the time frame, it's quite common actually when a permission is coming towards the end of its sort of 5 years and they haven't implemented, that they'll submit an application to extend the time frame to keep that permission live, if you like. They don't necessarily have to tell us the reason why. It's just they want to keep that permission in place. So it would have been assessed against all the relevant policies at that time. I will go back and check. I think, again, it wasn't viable contributions, but I will just check on that afterwards. In terms of visitor parking, yes, that's included within the provision. And then your last query about the no-dig construction.
If you look at the plan,
Yep.
the overall plan of the building and the development, the dig close to the chestnut tree from the plan of the development is very similar to that as the car parking space. So I was concerned that if you have no dig on the car parking space, why is there still allowed to dig for the construction of the development?
See, Alan wants to come in here. Do you want to come in now, Alan?
Yeah, just to clarify on the previous permission consent, there wasn't any section 106. The same, albeit slightly different development, the same sort of viability arguments were upheld. So there was no 106. The 106 was waived.
Okay, thank you. Gail?
On the tree issue then, so this plan, I don't know if you can see it, there's a slightly darker line around this these parking spaces here, this is where the no-dig construction is proposed. The condition we're recommending is actually requiring it to extend further than that, so to include these spaces here and then also these here, and that is kind of marries up with the previous extant consent in terms of the no-dig construction. The cross-section shows here that the levels can be kept as they are at the moment, so there wouldn't be a need to excavate down to create those parking spaces. Does that answer your query?
No, not really, because what I'm concerned about is the digging of the footings of the development itself, not necessarily the parking, because it looks on the plan that the development is very close, very similar to that of the parking spaces.
I see.
So why are we allowing that to be dug but not the parking spaces? I didn't see the sense in it.
Yeah. So the root protection area is it is broadly similar to this tree canopy, so it is outside of the root protection area. So construction here shouldn't affect the tree roots. In any case, we've got a condition on the consent requiring a tree protection plan, so they'll come in to us and will ensure that tree roots are protected.
Chair, one other question, if I may. In regards to Godfrey Road, you say there's no splay required on going north. What concerns me, if that road is changed in any direction, whether it goes one way south or one way or both ways, who's going to foot the bill for the splay on that development?
And I guess all I would say to that is we can only assess it as it currently stands. I'm not aware of any proposals to make it a two-way street, so it wouldn't really be fair to the applicant to require them to provide that visibility spray. We can only base it on what currently exists.
So that applies to other developments on one-way streets as well, I'm assuming. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mogford.
Thank you, Chair. On the conditions for the electric charging point, which you've accepted, could we just drill down a little bit in terms of how many charging points would be acceptable for the size of the development? And I suppose it's my own personal view. How is it costed in terms of, I mean, if you've got a charging point, who benefits from that in terms of the payments? Because if you put it down as a condition, are you expecting the contractors to just come up with a solution that maybe a third party provides it, or it may be tapped into the flats themselves? So are the residents effectively paying for their own charger? Those sort of questions are a little bit unclear to me. And if you're going to put something in a condition, how clear are you going to be?
Normally with our conditions, we'll ask for a scheme of electric charging points. They'll come in with the details, which include the number of spaces, the infrastructure, where that's going to go, and the type of charging point. How it's the onus is on the developer, obviously, to provide those charging points. The applicant or the occupiers wouldn't need to provide them. They would need to provide that before flats are actually occupied. In terms of footing the bill for the actual electricity.
I guess my question is, how do you word the condition to satisfy the requirements for charges?
Like I said, it's asking for a scheme to come in, providing all of that detail, type of charging point, the number, where they would go, the infrastructure, how it would be laid.
And how would that be assessed?
As officers, we would have to assess that.
And would that come back to committee naturally, or?
No, I mean, all conditions that would be dealt with under delegated powers.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on concerns raised by Councillor Watkins with the tree and protection. I've known some TPO trees being protected by safeguarding with fencing and such like that, but on a lot of construction sites I've seen, people actually put pallets, scaffolding and other stuff on there. So I'm just raising a concern, really. Even though you put a protection in there, I have seen builders and that working to the limit to the boundary and placing pallets and stuff on the ground where the trees, and sometimes they do get damaged. So if we are going to protect this tree, it needs to be a substantial protection and not just a temporary one where the builders can actually overflow onto that land and damage the roots.
Yeah, so the tree protection plan will normally require the area to be fenced off. It will have signs saying no construction zone or it's exclusion zone. And, you know, we rely on contractors to behave responsibly and work within those conditions.
Yes, thank you for that. But just for clarification again, a fixed scaffolding scheme is the best way, because if it's a temporary where you've got this sort of like plastic fencing, it easily gets knocked over and abused. So is there any way we can ensure that it is secure, as in metal fencing, and it's not able to be knocked down, or it's a 6-foot fence, I believe, instead of like a 3-foot plastic one? Can we ensure that's used instead of just a plastic one?
Yeah, our condition asks for Harris fencing in particular. It actually uses the words Harris fencing in the condition.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, we go to the vote, and the recommendation we grant the conditions. All those in favour, please? Okay, that's passed unanimously. Okay, it wasn't missing me that I was going to go on to item number 2 of the planning, but we're going to go back to item number 3 of the agenda, I'm sorry. I forgot to go for the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of March. Could I don't usually go through them, I don't know. I hope you've all read them. And can I have somebody to propose a true record, please? Okay, Jason John, seconder. Councillor Linden. Okay, thank you. We now go on to item number 2 of the plan application. Okay. Yeah, and we're just waiting for Councillor Jones to leave the room. Councillor Jones, do you want to be called back in at the end, or should we just let you know when we come in? Oh, okay, right, yeah. Technology nowadays. Yeah, I will, yeah. Okay, thank you. We now go on to item number 2 of the planning application, which is from page 34 to 45. This is application 22-1224. And the site is Bryn Headed. That's good. Good, thank you. I lost my page now. Yeah, so we now go. And this will again be presented by Gail Parkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is application 22-1224, and it relates to a property known as Bryn Headed, which is located off Cocknorth Road, Lane, here, and also has an access off Penchporth Road here. It's to the west of Rederin in the Graig ward. The application is for the conversion and extension of existing barns to provide new ancillary accommodation and garages. It's a resubmission following a part refusal in October last year. It was part approved, part refused. The approval parts relate to some minor works to the house, which were granted, but the conversion and extension of the barns was previously refused, and that decision was made under delegated authority. The application has been brought before committee at the request of Councillor John Jones. Okay, to give you some bearings then, the red marker is the application site here. and it's west of, this is Rederin Heights here, and this is the village of Rederin to the north here. The site is within the countryside and also within a special landscape area. Here's a closer aerial view of the site. So this is the main dwelling here, and there are two smaller stone-built barns here, so some outbuildings here and here, and then a slightly more modern garage building in this location here. It's the larger of the two barns, so this barn here and the garage building, which are subject of this application. And it's proposed to extend the garage building towards the barn, infilling this space here, and then also extending the barn towards Cockernorth Lane, which you can just about see in this orange shaded area here. And then a closer view. So this orange shaded area here would be the extension towards the barn, and then the extension towards the road. Just to show you some photos then of the barn. This is its front elevation. You'll notice traditional features, including that barn door, and it has a fairly agricultural appearance. There's another view you can see from the front. In the background you can see that smaller agricultural building, and then to the rear here is part of that more modern garage building, and it's proposed to extend the barn out towards the rear of that garage building. And here's a view from Cockernorth Road. So the proposal is to extend out towards the road in line with that rear of the garage building. And then another view from the road. You can see the garage building here and the barn. And then this is a view from within the site, looking at the rear of the barn building and then the garage to the right-hand side. So this is a plan view of the existing existing garage building, sorry. It's currently finished in a render, and it's got some typical garage-style doors. And then this is the existing barn in plan view, showing those traditional features. It's proposed to alter the roof to give it a uniform height across its width, and it would be proposed to extend it in this direction here. Okay, here's some elevations of the proposed development. So you've got a plan of the existing barn above, and then the proposals to extend it from roughly this point towards the road. The existing doors would be replaced by 3 other garage doors, and some roof lights positioned here. This view then is looking towards the more modern garage building. It's proposed to replace the garage doors with these garage doors to mirror those of the barn. And it's also proposed to stone-clad the building. And then this would be the linking through extension to the barn. This view here is the rear of the barn, and it's proposed to insert and construct 1 dormer window in this location. And then this view here is from the road, albeit there is hedgerow and a wall slightly obscuring that view, but you can see the linking extension through to the barn building, and then the insertion of a large glazed window. And then that's just a more close-up view from the road, and you can see the existing hedgerow along the boundary and an existing wall along the boundary. Again, this is that linking through extension and the extension towards the road with the large window. And then this is an illustrative view of that same view from the road. Okay, just to give you some floor plan details. So this would be the ground floor. It's proposed to extend the garages, or create garages rather, and extend them through to that linking extension. The depths range from about 9 metres through to 10 metres overall. And then there will be some stairs up to the first floor. You probably can't see that writing, so that says guest living room, bathroom, and guest bedroom. Okay, so I'll just run through the main considerations then on the application. So that is the planning history of the site, the changes since the last application, the design, and then also protected species. Okay, first looking at then the planning history of the site. So in 2008, planning permission was granted for the conversion and the extension of the buildings to create a guest annex and garages. And here's some illustrative drawings of that permission. You'll note the extension here. It's quite similar to what we're looking at today, but also had quite a much larger extension to the rear, and I'll just show you some of the plans submitted at the time. So that's that front elevation, again looking similar to what we're looking at today, and that would the side extension, but you'll note that it also included a much larger extension to the rear. At the time, officers didn't support the proposals. We were concerned over the scale and the visual impact of those extensions. The application was referred to committee and it was granted contrary to officer recommendation. However, that permission has expired and it has lapsed for some time, since 2014. And since then, you know, we've had a new local development plan, and there's a greater focus on placemaking through Planning Policy Wales. So it has expired, and it doesn't represent a fallback position for this application. Then in 2021, a new application was submitted, again to convert and extend the barns. That application was refused by officers under delegated powers. The proposal is visually very, very similar to what you have before us today. That was the proposal of the previous consent. You'll note it was almost exactly the same. The only visual change really is the omission of the dormer windows, which have now been replaced with 2 roof lights instead. So why did we refuse the last application? The main differences between this application and the last application is, 1, the removal of those dormer windows, and 2, the level of accommodation on the first floor has changed. So the last application proposed a kitchen, dining room and a living room in this space here, a bathroom and a bedroom and a utility room. Whilst it was called annex accommodation, annex or guest accommodation, when we assessed it against the annex policy, which is policy H7, it failed to satisfy the criteria of being ancillary accommodation because it contained a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, a utility room, and a living room. So it allowed for entirely independent living. There was no dependency upon the main dwelling. And because of that, it failed the annex policy, which requires that level of dependency to be shown. And the policy then directs us to assess it as if it was a independent dwelling, so a new dwelling. So these were the reasons for refusal. The first reason for refusal relates to that it being contrary to the annex policy. So because we were assessing it as a new dwelling, there were concerns about the intensification of the access onto Cockernorth Road and onto Pentraporth Road. Neither access is we considered that the accesses had substandard visibility, and actually we didn't have any visibility displays to demonstrate that there would be adequate visibility. So that was the third reason for refusal here. The fourth reason, because the application was submitted as annex accommodation, no separate outdoor amenity space was shown. So it didn't have that. So that resulted in reason number 4. And then because it was a new dwelling, or we were considering it as a new dwelling in the countryside, away from public transport connections, any suitable walking or cycle routes, it was considered an unsustainable form of development, and that was that 5th reason for refusal. So the proposals have now been modified. The amount of accommodation on the first floor of the barn just includes the living room, bathroom and bedroom. There is no kitchen. So there is now a level of dependency on the main dwelling. Occupiers would need or depend on the main house for those kitchen facilities. So it can be considered as ancillary accommodation, which if all other matters were acceptable, we'd seek to control through a condition. So most of those previous reasons for refusal have now fallen away. So reason 1, 3, 4 and 5, those reasons have fallen away, and we're just left with the reason for refusal relating to design and visual impact. So turning then to the design and visual impact, the last reason for refusal said, and I'll read it out, the proposed development, by reason of its insertion of large garage doors, dormer-style windows, and interlinking extension with a more modern building, would result in the loss of the historic and agricultural character of this modest traditional farm building, and would harmfully impact the rural character of the surrounding special landscape. As you've seen, those dormer windows have been omitted, but everything else visually is the same. So our recommendation in terms of the design impact remains the same. We considered that the agricultural appearance and the scale of the building should be preserved, as it provides a positive contribution in the rural landscape. Its extension to form a much larger building with a more suburban appearance would lose that agricultural scale. Just show you that barn again. Yeah, so the extension to form a much larger building with a more suburban appearance would lose the agricultural scale and character, which we consider to be harmful in the countryside and the rural setting, and in an area which has been designated a special landscape area. And so our refusal on this basis, or our recommendation rather, to refuse on this basis remains as it was previously. Before I sum up, I just wanted to talk about protected species, because that is relevant. So protected species being bats. A bat roost survey has been submitted with the application. one bat was detected, and the ecology officer is satisfied that this will actually be a low-risk case, meaning that no mitigation through planning control will be required, but a licence is likely to be required from Natural Resources Wales. And some ecological enhancement measures are proposed in the form of integrated bat tubes. So in that respect, we are satisfied with the proposal. And it's just that reason in terms of design that we're concerned about. So to summarise then, while those some previous reasons to refuse have been addressed, officers remain concerned about the visual impact on the extensions and alterations on the barn building itself and the rural landscape, and we're recommending that the application is refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail. Before we go on to any questions, we do have a public speaker in support of the application, and that is Mr. Gooden. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Chair Committee, many thanks for allowing myself to speak today. I hope the emails I sent out earlier in the week were received and provided a bit more background possibly than some of the officer's notes. I've lived in Brunello for close on 40 years, and for reference, it will be my only address, the only address that I ever plan to live in. Brief overview of the scheme, as the officer highlighted, there's a barn on site which is circa 15 metres long. There is actually an old coal shed which takes out the bit we're talking about expanding on the end. The roof, unfortunately, demolished, fell apart a couple of years ago. The garage below it is 19 metres. Those properties are extant as the image is shown. I'm glad the officer showed them today because they weren't in the notes. But literally all we're trying to do is fill the little gap between. By doing this, we'll return the barn to providing a functional use to the home with garaging downstairs and storage accommodation. Frankly, have used TBA above. We're restoring both the barn and the stable block, secure their survival for the next 100 years. And we're going to represent the 1980s garage to sit more naturally in its surrounding by taking down the outer course of breeze block, frankly, the whole way around the building, not just on the front face. We're going to replace all the doors will be solid oak doors when the officer refers to garage doors. These are going to be solid oak doors both on the barn and on the 1980s building out the back. We're also going to replace the ones on the stable block and fully restore that in terms of its roof and its walls. So, you know, I think the presentation is possibly a bit different. Under the relevant site history in the officer's notes, 3 applications. The first one, thankfully, once again shows a larger version of the scheme we're discussing today. My parents were still alive then, and that was to provide accommodation for my wife and I to share Brunello with my parents so we could look after them. Very similar in concept to the scheme we're talking about today, outside of the fact that there was that double gable end presented to Cockey North Road. Officer said the planners were against it, but thankfully the late and great Margaret Cornelius was in favour, and she organised a site visit which granted the approval. Unfortunately, by the time that scheme happened, the credit crunch was upon us. Our family business supplies the construction sector, and with 100 people in the factory in Yorkshire, quite frankly, we had other things to spend our money on. So that's why that scheme didn't happen. Second application referred to, not mentioned today, but the demolition of existing dwelling and the rebuilding of a replacement dwelling. It's quite clear, quite critical. What's not mentioned, that was only because of the total loss of the fire on June 4th, 2014, through fire. The house was completely demolished and had to be flattened. We rebuilt the front of it stone by stone to replace the 1895 section Lord Tredegar put on. The back section was rebuilt on a slightly smaller footprint. Disappointingly, the authority to do that slight change, which was slightly smaller, within it the delegated powers, the allowable powers for someone to change their property in a small way were taken away. We probably didn't realise the importance of that at the time, but the changes we're now making are so minor. If those allowed powers hadn't been a consent, part of the consent to that permission, we wouldn't even need to be here today because we could just make this change. Third application referred to in this section is the previous one, as I say, referred just last year. Number 1, provide substantial accommodation. Respectfully, how? The barn and the garage are there. We're just linking the buildings. Numbers 2 and 4 slightly contradict each other, I felt, because one suggested the development failed to provide the functional link between the barn and main dwelling, whilst number 4 said the proposal fails to provide adequate separate. Surely the issue is either the two things are linked, which is bad, or the two things are separate, which is bad. But those numbers 2 and 4 before seem to contradict. Number 3, the greatest respect. The proposal will result in intensification of vehicular traffic to and from the site. It's failed to demonstrate Cockey North Lane and Pentraforth Road. We're not seeking an apartment block for 40 units here. This is a private dwelling which is going to have no further occupants in. which we've lived in successfully for 40 years. So I don't think that's greatly fair. Number 5, the proposal results in an unsustainable development in the countryside which lacks access to service within a safe walking or cycling distance. Lived there for 40 years, I keep saying it, but whilst my wife and I, tail end of our 50s, we do manage to walk to Basilic shops most weeks, so I think we tick that one. It really does come down to number 6, as once again the officers said. The proposed development, by reason of insertion of garage doors, etc., results in the loss of historic and agricultural character of this modest traditional farm building. I heartily agree the view out the back of our house towards Macon is such that if you were driving through the Swiss Alps, you'd probably stop and take a photograph. It is spectacular. I've lived there my entire life. I'm not going to move. And trust me, anything we're going to do under the quality of these works will just add to that impression. In terms of what we're discussing today...
Sorry, Mr. Gooden, you have 30 seconds. Could you sum up, please?
Well, we took the planner's advice and got rid of the gables. We put the Velux windows in. I'll let the council decide if that was true. It was suggested to us that the link, it would potentially be acceptable if it wasn't a continuation of the traditional slate roof, but a flat roof. That, for us, was too much. That bridging that gap, we think, would be a complete anathema between two buildings. So, yeah, I hope the image I sent out was fine. I was surprised that the briefing notes today ran to 11 pages with no images.
Okay, Mr. Gooden, just time's up, sorry.
Okay, I do apologise. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go on to any questions for the planning officer. Councillor Montfort.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. This comes down to the visual impact. And we hear that Councillor Cornelius called for a site visit. It's difficult for us, I think, as a committee to really appreciate the visual impact side of it without having been there, and I'm sure the officers have from the photographs. What do we mean by visual impact in terms of the public? How closely can the public see this? Is it something that's visible from the highway? Is there a... I can see something there, but can we get a response back on how visual it is and who gets impacted by it?
I mean, it's close to the road, so you can see views when travelling along Cockernorth Road.
So this is the road we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a lane, is it, or a road?
Yeah, sorry, Cockernorth Lane, yeah. Yes, Doctors Highway. And so that extension comes closer to the road. You see my cursor, yeah, coming closer to the road than it is at the moment. And that elevation also visible above the wall there from the road.
Yeah, so I think one of the dangers of this, from my perspective, is if you develop something then, as a positive, if you leave it to rot and the roof to fall in, that's a negative. Yeah, so there has to be a compromise in terms of the owners investing in their properties and maintaining the properties. So I feel a bit uncomfortable in terms of the visual impact if we have to make it purely on that basis.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Ranald.
Thank you, Chair. You might want to take a note of the date and time, actually, because I'm actually going to agree with Councillor Mogford. Doesn't happen very often. The visual impact it concerns me slightly as well. As you went through the presentation, the thing that struck me most was obviously that large window. It's very, very imposing. I can see the point you're making with the visual impact. But there is a balance to be struck, I think, between the possible visual impact. I mean, it's facing out onto what looks to me like a very quiet lane, which I don't know how much use that lane gets, but it seems pretty quiet. And then there's a balance between that and what might happen if nothing was done. And as Councillor Mogford said, the building possibly going into disrepair and actually looking worse than it does at the moment. would there be any sort of prospects of a site visit to maybe do some better analysis of this? Because it is hard to visualise, even with the pictures, it's quite hard to visualise exactly what the impact might be. I have a lot of sympathy for the applicant, but I can also see the points of view that you're making as well, so I am slightly torn on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Going back to the first application you actually made, you know, there was two ends. Actually, the windows were nearly exactly the same. What you're doing is just taking away the one window and putting it where, virtually to the end, sorry, to the edge of the wall. Exactly so what Councillor Mockford said. I mean, it's really the application for the first time was granted, but now it's sort of brought back, you know. So with them taking the one gable end out with a big window to just replace it for the one, I can't see there's been a problem. But actually, with the window there, with the views you see outside that window, I suppose, across the valley and everything else, is quite astonishing, more likely. But like I said, with the impact, I can't see there being a problem. But I would support a site visit of the place.
Councillor Linton.
Thank you, Chair. I can see both sides of the argument here, the officer's recommendations and the applicant's. And I wouldn't like to see this ban fall into disrepair any further than it is. But I do consider that you should always have a break between a boundary line and the building. So I think encroaching onto the boundary line further will have an impact, a visual impact on that main road. It's not actually a main road, it's a road. But no matter who uses it, it's going to have an impact. So I would always go with the officer recommendation, having a break in between the two.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. The gentleman, the developer, I'm assuming, mentioned about the Tredegar, Lord Tredegar part of the estate. Is the building or any part of the buildings listed at all in regards to that? And I'm a bit confused in regards to the self-contained apartments, whatever you like to call it, above the garages. A number of places within Newport, although they're new developments, are developed like that, above garages, with bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms and everything else, and they seem to be okay. For some reason, a self-contained apartment like that above garages on this development is not allowed. I don't understand that.
Gail.
Yeah, on the annex accommodation, it's a new dwelling in the countryside. That was the previous concerns. Obviously, those concerns have gone away by this application because it is now ancillary accommodation. But that was the reason for part of the refusal on the last application. There are other policy concerns for new dwellings in the countryside. Oh, sorry. No, the building isn't listed. No.
Councillor Jordan, you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. With the extra little bit you can actually put in between to make the buildings together, is he actually still using the actual same stone to actually keep it in line with the actual buildings itself?
We haven't had full details of materials. If we were recommending approval, then we would like to require those through a condition to agree those samples possibly as well.
Okay. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, talking about the visual impact from this road, this lane, can I ask how high that wall is that runs along the side of the farm?
I'll need to measure that, so I'll come back to you.
Sorry, could you please answer it? Yeah.
So 8 foot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So if it's 8 foot, you're not actually see over that wall when you're driving down that lane or walking down that lane. It's just that photograph looks like it's been taken from an elevated position. So the impact wouldn't be that great. I agree with my colleagues here that if that building goes into disrepute, it's a higher building, it'll have more of an impact. Just that thing put there. Thank you.
Okay, Gail, anything you want to come back on that?
And you just say that the photo is just taken from a standard height.
Councillor Markford, do you want to come back with something?
I think if we're pretty much done, I'd like to propose a site visit.
Okay, do we have a second to that? So, all those in... Sorry? Okay. The proposal is we have a site visit. Do you have a reason for that site visit?
I think it's been expanded in the last few minutes. It's quite uncertain as to what the actual visual effect will be. I think you have to be there to get a feel for it. I would feel uncomfortable without having seen it firsthand, because these are pictures. And as was said, you know, is that taken from, is that a person with a camera at head height? Is that someone on a ladder? I don't know. So I'd like to see for myself to be comfortable as to vote in either way.
Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder for that. Can we put it to the vote? All those in favour of a site visit, please? Those against? So that's hasn't been passed. So we now go to the recommendation. Could all those in favour of the sorry. All right, so can we have somebody to propose the recommendation for refusal? Right then, so we've got no proposers for refusal, so we don't need a second out, so now we have to get for the... Yeah, so do we now have a... Sorry?
Yeah, Chair, I'll propose we go against the officer's recommendation and grant the application.
Do we have a seconder? Okay, all those in favour? Yeah, okay. Do we have to ask for conditions off the floor now? Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that will... sorry, those against? I'm not sorry. Those against the new proposal. So I put my... Okay, thank you. Okay, but now we need to have the planning department will need dedicated powers to put the conditions in. All those in favour of that? Okay. Okay. Is that it? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, you lost me there. So, can you just...
Yeah.
Can you just...
Tracy will explain.
Where are we going from here?
It's been granted. The committee have gone against the planning department.
I understand that, obviously, but the last bit you said...
Tracy would explain that.
So, thank you, Chair. So, at the moment, the report before you gives a reason for refusal. There are no conditions proposed should the committee overturn the application. So, we will need to impose certain conditions, such as the materials conditions that Gail spoke about. We don't have those conditions ready for you, so we'll need delegated powers to impose necessary and reasonable conditions to enable the development to proceed in a acceptable manner. That's usual. If we grant consent, you'll see a host of conditions on the report. So this report doesn't have that, so we're just saying to you we need the delegated powers to impose the necessary conditions.
Okay, and I think it's important everybody here understands what we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, sir, you can't speak again. Sorry. No, can't speak, sorry. Okay, that's great then. Okay, you can now leave if you wish. Should we ask Councillor Jones back in now? He's not on there. Okay, can we ask Councillor Jones to come back in? Okay, there's nothing else to... So, yeah, okay then. Okay, thanks.
Chair, on a point of procedure, Councillor Jones was asked to leave and he indicated that he would... Yes, why not? Sorry.
Well, we've finished now. Once
Yeah.
these have gone, then we
Yeah.
can... we'll discuss this when they've left the room.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, what's your point?
Councillor Jones was asked to leave, and I understand that. And then he said he would go and watch it online. What is the difference between leaving and watching it online and sitting in the gallery?
It's part of the... Want to come?
You understand the advice that was given to...
So I can't hear you.
Sorry, we're having mic problems. The Councillor Jones is not part of the meeting as far as being online, so that's why he wouldn't be in the public gallery. It's an advice for the councillors as a member of the committee. Obviously, I don't want to go into his details for having left the room, but we advise leaving the room so that it doesn't impair on the meeting itself or have any influence. It would be a breach of code of conduct if it was to influence, so it's better to leave the room.
But it's okay to observe the meeting externally. I think that's my main point, that you can still observe it remotely.
Yes, well, we can't control that by what he's doing online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. It just seems slightly anomalous, but... Okay.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just add, I mean, obviously, if Councillor Jones was to have joined online and be present on the screen, we would need to have addressed that. But as you're all aware, planning decisions are open to challenge. So if an aggrieved objector, for example, felt that Councillor Jones's presence was unduly influencing the rest of the committee, then we would be subject to challenge. So the way the protocol works is that anybody that has declared that interest doesn't sit in the room or isn't present on screen. But obviously there is public access to view the proceedings, but there can't be any inference or allegation of influence if we can't see him or he's not in the room.
Thank you, and we all understand that, so that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is appeals decisions, page 47, and that is for information only. Thank you all for attending. Have a good Easter, and we'll see you all next month.